there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with the Scarish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, as MD, and today
Hello.
We're back with a couple more creepypastas for you folks, and hopefully get you guys in the post-Halloween spirit.
I believe this one's coming out on Friday, so they're 2 days before Halloween.
Into the Halloween spirit!
Perfect! Robin's a little bit sleepy. She just woke up from a nippy nap, so I'll go ahead and explain what creepypastas are for those of you who might not know and for some reason decided to start on Pastatime number 19. But creepypastas are short, typically, fictional, always, horror stories that we can find all around the internet, places like Creepypasta, the SCP Foundation, the No Sleep Reddit, I think is the one that you like to go to sometimes.
Yep.
And even from our very own Spooky Friends community. And we do have one story we will be reading tonight from a spooky friend, so pretty excited to do that. We are going to be doing 4. Robin said a couple, but we're actually doing 4. Couple means typically 2.
Whatever.
Just want to get that out there. So I'm going to be doing a short and a long. Robin also has a short and a long, so should be pretty fun. I believe you're going to be going first, so I'll go ahead and pass the mouse over to you, and you can get it really rolling.
All right, so the first one I'm going to read is titled, The Reason I Don't Do Cold Readings Anymore. I don't know if I haven't read this one before. Maybe I've read it by myself, but...
Did you check the list to see whether or not we've actually read this before? I don't think we have. It doesn't sound familiar. So.
I don't think so either. At least I don't think I've read one this long before.
You've read long ones before.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit.
When I pasted this one over, it was like 9.5, 10 pages or something like that. But there's a lot of dialogue. So we get to hear Robin's voices. You have such good dialogue voices that I'm really happy that you read ones with dialogue. So, all right, let's go ahead and just let her take it away. Everyone, shh. Here we go.
I don't do cold readings anymore. I don't tell fortunes. I don't read tea leaves. And I do not do contact the other side. Don't judge me, all right? It was an easy gig. I mean, the first time I did it, it was a joke. I did it just to impress a girl. You've been there, right? It was something I'd read about online, and I thought I'd give it a go. Cold reading. I don't need to tell you that there's no such thing as a psychic. It's just extremely convincing, educated guessing. I know. If you believe in this stuff, you've definitely got a story to tell me that starts, quote, yeah, most are fake, but this one time, and you'll tell me some incredibly specific thing that they couldn't possibly have known. Honestly, though, if you could have been there when you got your revelatory message, you gave them everything they needed. They just connected dots. See, people aren't desperately unique. Not really. You only need 23 people before there's a 50% chance that 2 of them have the same birthday. You give me a crowd of 50 people and I'll find someone born in August with an important L in their life. Luck, Leeds, Louise, something like that, and I'll have everything I need. It's not hard. People like a sense of pattern in their lives. It gives them a sense of control. It's why people like conspiracy theories. It's hard to think that everything really is as shit and meaningless and random as experience would imply. When someone flies a plane into a building, it's easier to think it's just another cog in some grand scheme than face up to the fact that, actually, it really doesn't take all that much other than a fuck up and a box cutter to completely ruin everything.
This sounds
very specific.
This sounds like 2 things. This sounds like the episode of South Park where they just bust out John Edwards, the cold reader, for being completely full of shit. And 2, this sounds like the Joker's rant from Dark Knight, where it's like, it's all part of the plan.
Similarly, when you're holding the hand of a 5-year-old girl long after her long black hair has fallen out and she's looking at you for help and you can't, maybe it's easier to think it's just a crappy part of a bigger plan. You're both just changing lines for a bit, but you're heading to the same destination. So look, I'm not defending myself. I'm not saying I'm not a twat in all this. I'm just saying that I never wanted to deceive people. Not maliciously. I just thought I was providing a service, an outlet, maybe. So when I did my cold readings, I got quite good at them. It's pretty simple, really. You're just a salesman. If you can sell a used car, you can sell a reading. It all boils down to 2 things, confidence and knowing your audience. Like, all right, let me tell you a story. One of the first times I did it was in a bar. It was a chain bar, one of those where the menu is the same in every town and the happy hour hasn't changed since 2008. I was being introduced to a group of my girlfriend's friends, and so I was on my best behavior. Captain Charming, So when Maria, all olive skin and deep brown wavy hair, said that the women in her family always had a sort of gift for talking to the beyond, I saw a chance. So I read her. My girlfriend was 24 and they were university friends, so I guessed that Maria was likely a year either side max. She was thus probably a child of the early 90s, young enough that likely her parents were still alive, but that she may have lost a grandparent or two. There were no rings on her fingers, so I guess she wasn't married, and the way she poured into that red cocktail dress pretty much counted out the chance of her being a mom. Just saying.
It's pretty fucked up.
That's fucked up.
I know a lot of moms that recover very, very well from whatever pregnancy weight they gain.
So, grandparents were the way in. The most common first letter in first names are J for men and A for women. For men, this is especially useful as it takes care of all the Johns, James, and Jacks, which have had staying power during the generations.
Do you know what the most common name for a female in the United States of America is? It is Jennifer.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the cold read begins, right? So, there's someone who wants to speak with you. Maria's eyes flicker with excitement. This is a good sign. I'm getting an A? No reaction at all from Maria. Luckily, it's an easy conversion. No, not A, it's a J. Another flicker. She takes in a sharp breath. Bingo. I think it's a James or a John. John, yes, John, my grandfather. He's here with us now. Now, most people at this point are still pretty skeptical. Maria was taking the bait with gusto, but most people would still be sat back in their chairs at this point, single eyebrow raised. Now you gotta hit him with something a bit more personal. With grandparents, it tends to be a pretty positive relationship that you're playing on. I mean, if it's a dead partner, there can be all kinds of baggage to unpack, but dead grandparents are usually a big bag of happy memories. So that's the card you play. If they're wanting to talk to grandparents, it's because they want to feel that same safeness again. First, though, gotta pull them in with something that seems specific. I see him watching over you, but I see a blackness in his chest or abdomen, that kind of area. It's a fair shot usually. Something north of 85% of deaths of men over 65 are due to some sort of complication around there. Probably like heart attack or something, I assume. It continues. But he wants you to know he's at peace, and he says he sees you struggling with something. A choice, perhaps? He's saying that you should follow your heart, and you shouldn't worry about the money. See, that seems really personalized, but actually, when are we not toying with some kind of big choice? Even if it's not imminent, people are always juggling the idea of moving house or job or changing something up with their partner. And what big choice doesn't have financial implications? Or, moreover, who isn't worried about money literally all the time? Same as ever, feels personal, but applies to everyone. Maria's almost breathless at this point and starts asking really direct questions that would expose me if I tried to answer them honestly. This fucking asshole. He goes, no, he's fading. He's gone back over.
Oh, no, he's going away. Sorry, no specifics, my bad.
So that's how I got started. But then, it got out of hand. See, Maria had bought the whole act. She told a friend who told a friend who told a friend. Soon, I had people ringing me and texting me asking for readings. Then, they started offering money. Well, cut a long story short, that's how I ended up on stage here earning £2,000 for a 2-night performance in the conference center of a shitty airport hotel outside Manchester. The first night, like any other night, the venue was about a third full. I was wearing my black suit with the open-collared blue velvet shirt, very 80s Butlins entertainer outfit. I was scanning the room for easy marks, someone clutching at jewelry or a picture. The ticket asks them to bring something belonging to the person they wish to contact. So the second you see anyone with their hands full, you know you've got a gullible mark. And there she was, nervously spinning her wedding ring with a photo resting on her lap. Dead husband. My bread and butter.
It's pretty fucked up.
I sat with her and, well, there's a reason I don't do these anymore. I played it safe at first. I'm getting a J. She took a deep breath and started to react. Before I could get a chance to read her reaction, another voice called from the other side of the room. It's him, came the voice. Sometimes you get someone who's a bit over-enthusiastic, someone who's so desperate to get in touch with their beloved that they'll assume that whatever voice is coming through is trying to get in touch with them, regardless of who the current mark is. It's why I stay away from quote-unquote sensing the letter R between the Richards and Dicks and Roberts and Bobs. Half the sodding room thinks they're being contacted. I got ready to politely ask the interpreter to sit back down. I have a feeling the person that wrote this is probably British or something like that.
I saw something spelled with a U where U's don't go in American English, so I was just like, aha.
But there was nothing. No one. I turned back to the widow. She was steeling herself to get in touch with her J. I caught a brief glimpse of what I thought was the name Alan on the wedding photo in her lap and was ready to fix my pitch according when the voice came again. This time, just a single word rang through so loud it arrived with a blinding white. Him. My eyes focused again on the widow in front of me. She was taking little shallow rasps of breath and staring at me with eyes like a startled deer. I spun around to try and find the source of the yell, but there was no one. Did anyone else hear that? The crowd, assuming it was part of the gig, simply shook their heads. Catching my breath, I tried to get back on track. No, not a J, it's an A. Slam! Another bullet train of sound to the back of my mind. Him! It's him! I was knocked back a few paces, panting, beads of sweat form on my forehead. I pulled at my tie to loosen it. Please, I pleaded with the crowd, try not to shout when the voices are coming to me. It makes it hard to concentrate. What had been amused half smiles at what they assumed was showmanship became puzzled, silent exchanges with the people sitting near them as I asked the silent crowd for quiet. I went a third time to speak to the widow, but the voice rung out again, popping in my ears as though it had been trapped in a bubble. Third row, red shirt. Him. He killed me.
Record scratch, what? I feel like I'm watching Ghost.
I was still catching my breath, panting heavily. I scanned the crowd, and sure enough, there he was. Third row, red, casual-fitted shirt that looked expensive. Short brown hair and a modern professional cut, framing a neutral, polite smile. Light brown chinos, oh God, and brown leather shoes. Arm draped around the shoulders of a nervous-looking blonde woman. I couldn't see her face as she held an unbroken look with her lap. Her hands gripped the blue velvet clutch on her knees. Her legs were pinned together with a vice-like strength. It's like she's trapped.
Right.
Her shoulders drooped under the weight of his arm. Even as I met his eyes, he didn't let that neutral salesman grin drop. It was the grin of a man who sold the car and is going in to sell the paint job. Him. It's him. It's him. My knees cracked with the punches of the sound, and I fell to the floor. I could hear the gasps in the audience. People were out of their chairs, craning their necks, and crowding to see what was happening. I told you that this gig is all about the salesmanship. This was me losing the pitch. They wanted enthusiasm, not seizures. Back on my feet, the widow well at the back of my mind, I managed to rise, zombie-like, to my feet. I raised a pointed finger at Mr. Redshirt. I'm getting a voice, I croaked. I pinched the bridge of my nose and put out an arm, evangelical style.
What a douchebag.
What's your name? Gemma. My name is Gemma. She says her name is Gemma. Does that mean anything to you? Redshirt's grin spreads. Sorry, pal. Nothing to me, was his only reply. She's saying she knows you. Redshirt laughed. Never known a Gemma in my life. What a douche nozzle. His companion raised her head at the mention of the name. Her eyes were wide and pricked with tears. Gemma's voice in my ears got louder and shriller and more panicked. I could feel my heartbeat in my eyes. Soon I was simply parroting her words. She's saying you killed her. You killed her and buried her body out the back of Bleacher's Woods by the A55. She's saying you were waiting for her after she finished work and you came up behind her and clocked her around the head and put her in the back of your white Ford Transit. The crowd was bustling now. This was not what they'd paid for.
No, they're getting way more than what they paid for.
They wanted financial advice from Granddad, or to know that little Robbie is happy in heaven after he came off his bike and fell under the 681 bus to Salford. Jesus, that's so fucking specific.
Right.
Not to have some sweating charlatan shouting accusations at innocent audience members. People were grabbing their bags and starting for the doors. I couldn't stop, though. By now, I was just a puppet for Gemma's voice. You thought I was out cold, you fuck. But I was just barely conscious. I felt everything. I felt you tearing my clothes. I felt the way you scraped my underwear against my it's too detailed. When you were too weak to tear them off in one. I felt the dirt as it landed on my back. I heard you pat down the soil before one type of darkness gave way to the next. The steadfast grin on Red Shirt's face was back. I was alive, you bastard. Not even a hint of his grin slipping. This guy's a fucking monster.
He's a psychopath.
Gemma's voice was fading, like someone being dragged away in a noisy bar, her voice replaced by the din of silence. No, not yet. You have to warn her. Amy! Amy! And with that, Gemma was gone, and like a puppet with the strings suddenly cut, my shaking knees buckled, and I fell to all fours and emptied my guts all over the worn and dirty brown carpet flooring. People were streaming out now, muttering criticisms under their breaths. Worst show ever. Macabre nonsense. I told you we should have gone to the cinema. Red Shirt strong-armed his partner out of her seat and started marching towards the door. I reached out from my prone position to try and grab the hem of her skirt, but she was already out of reach, and I could barely stand. Through the sweats and the panting, I looked up to see Red Shirt ushering the woman out the door. I thought I saw tears in her eyes. In the confusion and bustle of the crowd leaving the room, I thought I saw her reach out towards me, but Red Shirt had a firm grasp on her shoulder. He stared back at me, that same salesman grin on his face, and he winked, and they were gone. I stumbled to my feet, standing in my own vomit as I started towards the door. I burst into the foyer, desperate to try and find Red Shirt and his crying companion. But in the bustling crowd, I couldn't see either of them. I just stood there. A wave crashed through again, a final hurrah from Gemma. Useless.
Jesus,
Fuck.
Thanks.
Complaints about my performance flooded the venue, and they were forced to cancel the second night's performance. Of course, I'd already paid for the hotel room, so spent the second evening sat at the bar trying my best to forget about Gemma. I was on the third whiskey when a tail-end news report caught my ear about a missing woman. The prim news reader stated, Police are appealing for witnesses in the disappearance of Amy Hochstetter, a woman from the Salford area who was last seen leaving the Quays Hotel Conference Center with an unidentified man. She'd been attending an event hosted by alleged psychic Theo Capewell, an event that she'd attended because, according to friends, she'd been hoping to contact her sister, Gemma Hochstetter, who disappeared last year. Anyone with information should contact, and it fades off, and the rest of the report was lost to the din of the bar. Like I said, I don't do cold readings anymore. They're not cold enough.
Wow.
What the fuck? Probably because they're fucking too legit to quit.
Wow.
Oh my god.
I mean, they weren't too legit to quit because it sounds like he quit.
Oh yeah.
But the idea of like a psychic who is just faking it, and then it turns out they have like the gift of, I don't know what they typically call it, but they have the ability to talk to the dead. Like, that is just, like, straight up lifted from Ghost. That's all I'm saying.
Really?
That is Whoopi Goldberg's character 100%. However, this has definitely a different twist and a different ending, where essentially nothing happens. And
this person still gets murdered.
And the ghost calls you useless, which is very, very rude. But I don't know.
That's
I don't buy the reaction from the crowd in this story. I don't think a lot of people...
I think they'd be absolutely fascinated.
Yeah. I don't think they'd be like, oh, this is so dumb. He's making wild accusations at someone that's apparently a murderer.
I mean, in this day and age where so many people are obsessed with true crime, I think people would be like, oh shit, he's totally a murderer, fucking fuck.
It was like no one else noticed that this guy who just looks super creepy is holding on to a woman who looks like, one, she wants to get away from him, and two, is crying the whole time. It's kind of a stretch, but I guess if you could just assume that everyone is so far up their own ass they don't care about literally anyone else, it could be. So either way, it was very well written, and I thought you read it very well.
Thanks. It was written by a Kevin Thomas, so shout out to you, Kevin, for writing such a lengthy but good story.
Indeed. All right, so we're going to move into the second creepypasta of the show. This one is from Amber, and it is actually Amber from the Spooky Friends group. And this one's title is just Scary Story. There's no actual title for it. In parentheses, it says, should be read with a cheerful, robotic announcer voice. And while I can't go fully robotic, I'll go as, like, android-ish as I can do it. Good evening, passengers. As we continue our journey through the mountains, we would like to address a few items that have been brought to our attention.
I hate this voice.
Reports of missing passengers have been causing panic throughout the train.
Goddamn.
We assure you, no one has gone missing. Everyone you see is who was there before. There was never another passenger in the seat next to you, or in the row across from you, or even the row ahead of you. If you do see a passenger, ignore them, do not help them, and alert an attendant. Please. Thank you for your cooperation. We ask that all passengers please close the window curtains when the sun begins to go down. If you do leave them open, please look away. It is for all of our conveniences. We do not want to anger the creatures with glowing yellow eyes that live in these mountains. For the safety of others, if you do happen to make eye contact with one of the creatures, please let an attendant know so they may escort you off the train to prevent everyone on board from the wrath of the creature you were responsible for upsetting. It is common courtesy that you do this. There have been a few complaints about noises on the train, and a few of you have gotten up out of your seats to search for the source. We ask... What? I'm supposed to be reading it like a robot.
I can't stand it.
I can't stand you.
No.
We ask that you please stay in your seats and don't go looking for the noises. The walking you hear on the roof is just the snowfall. The sound of screaming is only the wheels of the train, and the sound of someone struggling in a back room, there is none. It's only your imagination. If you need help ignoring these sounds, call over an attendant to give you a pair of noise-canceling headphones. And please, stop getting out of your seats. We work to make your ride with us enjoyable. Finally, as we reach... What? Who? All right. Passenger ticket 015. An attendant is coming to bring you to the exit. Please follow them. You have alerted one of the creatures, and it's for the safety of other passengers that you leave. Thank you for understanding. Finally, as we reach the end of our journey, you may feel faint as you step off, and you may pass out. As you wake up, you'll find yourself back home and not at the train platform. Please refrain from sharing your experiences with us, as no one will understand what you are saying and will say you've been asleep the whole time. Rest assured that your ride with us was very much real. You can tell by the brand on your ankle. Don't ask how it got there. We hope you've enjoyed your ride with us, and we'll see you again very soon.
Sounds like aliens.
Yeah,
Sounds like abducted by aliens.
I really like this story. It reminds me of like a Doctor Who episode or something like that.
It does remind me of Doctor Who.
Straight up, I want to know more about the train. I want to know more about the rules. I want to know more about the creatures. Everything about this was just fucking awesome. I really like it. Good job, Amber.
Yeah.
You fucking nailed it. They put, fun fact, I wrote this as extra credit for a class, and the passenger ticket 015 was originally the name of someone in my class. I asked to use their name, but I didn't tell them what the story was about or what was going to happen to them. I didn't realize that their full name was going to be passenger ticket 015, so that's interesting.
Obviously. Murder.
But good stuff. We appreciated that. And for any spooky friends out there who have short stories that are fictional and horror, please send them in. If you have a short story that's non-fictional and horror, send those to Storytime, because we would love to read those as well. But shout out, Amber. Great job. So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into the next creepypasta, and it is again me reading. I'm going to go with my long one now. It's not as long as Robin's long, but it's long.
Long.
Starts out like this. No, actually, let's go with this. It is called The River Country Film. And it goes like this. It had been 3 years since my family had last gone on a vacation to Florida, something we did annually before the recession hit. Since we now had enough money, my parents decided, under the popular demand of my sister and I, that we would go to Walt Disney World again. We were both teenagers, and our parents kind of saw this as a bit juvenile, but decided it would be fun anyway. I could not wait to finally go back, and neither could my sister. Being avid theme park goers as well, we were especially attracted to the creativity and the, well, magic, as one would say, about the rides there. They never got old and had their share of nostalgia and excitement. However, there was one other reason I wanted to go. You normally associate Disney World with words such as excitement, fun, and happiness.
I mean, I don't know about excitement, but happiness, definitely. Happiest place on earth, right?
You're not excited to go there? Don't lie.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but with these characterizations come counterbalances. After scrolling through OMG Facts one night, I came across a rather interesting fact. It was about an abandoned water park in Walt Disney World, apparently named River Country. I think I actually went there when I was a kid.
No way.
Yeah, I definitely went to a water park within Walt Disney World when I visited when I was like 10. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I was absolutely appalled by this since I had previously thought of Disney in a more idealistic and perfect way. The water park was directly on the shores of Bay Lake, being that huge, stagnant body of water adjacent to the Magic Kingdom. River Country was, and still is, on the same side as the theme park just mentioned, but right next to a resort called Walt Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort. Surrounding the water park on the resort is a large green wall with signs dotting it.
Okay.
The place opened in 1976 and used water.
I know. I just feel like this is just a documentary about Walt Disney World right now.
I've read it. Just wait.
All right.
The place opened in 1970.
No, I'm not going to. Do you want me to hit you?
No, I don't. The place opened in 1976 and used water from Bay Lake in most of the park's attractions. It was very rustic and wilderness-based in design and contained artificial rocks that resembled those used on another attraction, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
Fucking love that ride. I'm all about that Big Thunder.
You gotta look at the goat when you go down. Like
only at Disneyland. Doesn't work at Disney World.
Really? I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Good to know. There was a dam present to keep chunks of dirt and mud from getting into the water too, so guests did not have to worry about swimming in an artificial bog created by water from the lake. It was open for 25 years. I totally did go to it. Closing its doors in 2001, and in 2005, a statement released by Disney said that the park would be closed for good. So for about 11 years, River Country has been sitting abandoned. Clearly, this was written in 2016. Nature is in its advanced stages of reclaiming the area, but the slides remain, and so do the artificial rocks and the small pond, now a swamp, that was used for swimming. Many urban explorers have infiltrated the area, jumping over the walls to get footage of the abandoned water park. One of the most controversial things about the park nowadays is why it closed, which is what I was destined to find out. I wanted to see some real footage of the area before it closed as well, since from what I heard, it was very joyous and bustling with tourists compared to its ghost town status today. I was without internet at the time, so about 2 days before we were planning to leave, I went to the local library, which archived many old videos that people in my community had dug up in their attics and donated to the library to be part of a small historical society. Hoping that I might find some good footage, I asked the librarian if they happened to carry any videos concerning family vacations. She nodded and brought me to a small section containing many old VCR cassettes and a few DVDs here and there. After about half an hour of searching, I finally came across a cassette with the words "the old-fashioned swimming hole" inscribed on the top of it. This was a term used to describe River Country during its glory days, so I took it out, almost certain that it was the footage I was looking for. I asked the librarian if I could sign it out, but she told me that the historical videos had to stay in the library. I could, however, watch the video in a small conference room behind the front desk. The librarian led me into the windowless room, and I took a seat in front of the television. She left the room and closed the door so that the audio would not disturb any of the other library patrons. I popped the cassette into the VCR into the TV and turned the lights off so I could see the video better. I was expecting the quality to be low anyway. For about half of a minute or so, the screen was gray, and was accompanied by a loud beeping noise, typical for old VCR cassettes. Oh, thanks for telling me what VCR cassettes used to be like. The gray it never lasted that long. The gray soon disappeared, showing footage of two individuals in front of the entrance to River Country. They were both men, and it was either very late at night or very early in the morning, as nobody else was in the park. Very few of the water park's lights were on either. On the bottom left corner of the screen, the date November 1st, 2001 was displayed. This was significant because the water park closed for good the very next day.
Oh God,
on
it's going to
November
be someone
2nd.
getting like murdered or dying or something in the watering hole.
The two men were talking about how they had been denied entrance to the park in the morning since it had reached its guest capacity limit. They also stated that at only these hours of night could they get past the park security. The two walked up to the bigger water slides in the park, which led directly into the pond supplied by the green water of Bay Lake.
Somebody poisoned the water hole.
Once they both got to the top of the slide, which was encircled by artificial orange rocks, one man prepared to slide down. The two laughed over what seemed to be an inside joke, and finally the cameraman ended up pushing his friend down. I heard him scream in delight as he descended to the pond. The cameraman then proceeded back the way they came to get to the slides and across a bridge that traversed the small lagoon. He ended up back at the pond shore where the sound of a splash was heard.
All right.
This is when the video started to unsettle me a little. After waiting at the shore of the pond for about 3 minutes, nobody surfaced.
No.
The cameraman began to cry his friend's name frantically and started to run back to get help at the Fort Wilderness Resort.
I have lost my suspension of disbelief because, one, I feel like the library would not carry a bunch of different families' vacation footage, right?
So you've lost the suspension of disbelief 2 pages ago, but are just now interrupting the story at the climax to let us all know.
Oh, okay.
So just saying, all I said during yours was, I criticized your story after the fact. He stopped abruptly, though at what seemed to be the kiddie area, a small, shallow pond, on hearing a faint cough. He instantly turned around and saw a barely visible shadow about 10 or so feet behind him. Relieved, the cameraman started to approach his friend, glad that he was okay, but then he abruptly halted. The friend's head was hanging down, and he slowly inched it up. The cameraman started to hyperventilate as the features of the other man's face began to show. Crimson, dry blood was caked around his mouth, and some was even dripping off of his chin. He was missing all the hair on his head as well, but one of the most disturbing parts of the image was that there were patches of skin missing that revealed parts of the man's skull and jawbone.
Acid. It was acid.
And he was even missing his right eye, leaving an empty socket. I became severely nauseous at the sight of this, to the point where I was swallowing my own vomit. My heart began to race as fear started to settle in my body. As the last minutes of the film approached, the horrendous figure muttered something that sounded like "there is no hope under the water," which is from Little Mermaid 2, if I'm not mistaken, when things get really dark. With that, the cameraman ran for his life, wheezing and panicking throughout his ordeal. I wanted to turn the television off and run myself, so I bolted to the door leading out of the room. I reached for the doorknob, but paused. The television was giving off the sound of an old furnace found in the basement of a home, just in a softer tone. This tone, for some unknown reason, kept me from moving anywhere. I was just staring blankly at the television. The cameraman was still sprinting, but did not seem to be making any progress. He had ended up back at the large pond where the slide had dumped his friend. You could hear him sobbing softly, fearing for his life. Suddenly, the tape began to gradually slow down as the man frantically looked from side to side. The audio volume, along with the furnace sound, went up as the video lagged. Haltingly, the cameraman turned all the way around and shrieked at the sight of his friend. The video paused on this frame, exposing the caked blood all over the other man's face. The top of his skull bone was now completely exposed, his right eye missing. His mouth was wide open, and coming from it was what looked like a combination of water from the Bay Lake and bile. This stayed on the screen for about 10 seconds, and then it switched to a black screen displaying one single message. The epidemic begins today.
What the what?
Instantly, the power went out, and I was left alone in the darkness of the conference room. I became so terrified as I could not see a thing. I could not see the door either. I began to shake in absolute fear. River Country had closed because of this, and it was obvious. Walt Disney World had been keeping a disgusting secret. I rushed to the other side of the room, disoriented, but all I felt was warm breath seeping down my neck and the smell of bile.
Oh my God, it came out of the TV!
And that's the end. So credit to Anonymous. They put a publisher's note in this, and they said, River Country is an actual abandoned water park that has been sitting dormant in Walt Disney World for over a decade. Oddly, the lights are still on within the area, and the music still plays as well. Many theories have come up about its closing, but one of the most plausible ones, and one that has been confirmed by Walt Disney World employees, is that a deadly type of amoeba was found within the water of Bay Lake, which was used to supply many parts of the theme park. The amoeba can cause severe illness or death, so as a precautionary measure, Disney closed the park for good.
I wonder if it's like one of those amoebas that it gets in your ears if you
And eats your brain.
And eats your brain, yep.
Shit's scary, dude, because it's real, and it will kill you. So when I was reading that one, I enjoyed it. I thought this is a pretty good one. Robin loves Disney, so I'll toss this in there, and hopefully she can interrupt me in the middle to tell me that she thinks it's bullshit and she doesn't believe it at all. So, okay. You lost your suspension of disbelief because the library had old family videos.
Yes.
I don't know if they actually do that or not. It does sound a little bit weird to me, but I know that the library I grew up around had videos that were donated from people. Like just VHS cassettes that were like recordings of movies off TV that still had commercials in them and shit.
All right.
So,
but would the library consider them historic, you know?
I mean, if they're old, I mean, they're cassette tapes at this point, so I guess they're fucking historic. I don't know exactly what a library would take in. I do think, though, my suspension of disbelief is, why wouldn't someone have already watched this? You know? How do you know it's not two people banging? Like, you're not putting pornography on the shelf for someone to rent out unless you check to make sure it doesn't contain anything inappropriate.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, why didn't this trigger sooner? Why didn't the epidemic begin if that guy only knew writing this in 2016? So, either way, I thought it was good. It's a nice, fun time to talk about. So, good stuff, Mr. Anonymous, whatever your name actually might be.
All right. So I'm going to read my final story of the episode, the final story of the episode. And it is titled Creek. Spelled C-R-E-A-K, just so you know, not C-R-E-E-K.
It's like something creaking open.
Yep. So, it goes. The inventor was frustrated. He had spent years, decades, researching the nature of time, and his work had finally come to fruition. He had invented a, theoretically, functioning time machine. With this, he knew he could silence all the naysayers who had repudiated the underlying goal of his research. They had told him, time without number, that time travel was impossible. Otherwise, one could create a paradox by, say, going back in time and killing one's grandfather before he had any children, in which case the time traveler would never even exist, and so wouldn't travel back in time to kill his grandfather, thus ensuring the grandfather's procreation and the time traveler's eventual existence, enabling the latter to go back in time and kill and blah, 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 and that becomes a paradox.
Paradox. If you believe in like that specific version of time travel theory, they explain the other version in Avengers Endgame, where you just create an alternate parallel universe, and no matter what you do, go back and do, you don't see like the reflections of your actions in your own timeline. It's weird. It's also Future Trunks' thing. So if you've ever watched Dragon Ball Z, because Trunks goes back in time, and when he goes back to his timeline, he's like, why is everything still fucked up? And they're like, oh, alternate dimension shit. I don't know.
He had long ago dismissed such nonsense, but as he achieved greater and greater success in his research, always in the comfort of his lab at home rather than at work, the problem grew in his mind. It did not occupy his conscious mind, but his unconscious thoughts were frequently considering it, weighing particular solutions, allowing the better ones to step up to the next floor in his mental architecture. This was actually how he did most of his thinking, with the result being that by the time an idea actually manifested itself in his conscious mind, he was essentially already decided on a course of action. Obviously, he had concluded, a man could not travel back in time and prevent the circumstances by which he traveled back in time in the first place. Just as obviously, thus the paradox, there would be nothing to stop a man from doing precisely that once he had already traveled back in time. Therefore, both conditions must be true. A man could travel back in time and kill his grandfather, but then he would continue to exist, and upon his return to the present he would discover that his grandfather had not been killed. Time travel, in other words, would only allow for observation, not interaction. No one would have to worry about accidentally stepping on a bug and somehow causing a volcanic eruption or whatever. This led to important side issues. Were one's actions actually happening somewhere or somewhen? What would happen if one then got stuck in the past where the apparent event had taken place, etc.? But his subconscious was already working on potential solutions to these questions. As to the main question, he had already decided what to do. Before he would bring his time machine to the attention of his colleagues, and the world for that matter, he would first have to divest them of this notion of paradoxes. To this end, he would travel back in time, perform an action that could not have happened, and then return to the present. He would do this with other people so they could verify that he had, in fact, done the impossible act in the past without endangering the present in any way. I need to finish Timeless. This is what this reminds me of.
Wow. Time Machine with Guy Pearce. It's a wonderful remake of the book by H.G. Wells, right? It's H.G. Wells who wrote Time Machine. The original Time Machine paradox, where he creates the time machine to go back in time and stop an event from happening. But the event he's going back in time to stop is the reason he created the time machine. Therefore, the universe will not allow him to prevent it. No matter what he does, it always winds up happening.
Is it kind of like the Flash trying to save his mom?
I mean, the Flash saves his mom and then breaks everything. That's what Flashpoint is. So, God, I'm really excited for that Flash movie. Michael Keaton back as Batman, y'all.
First, though, he would have to do it alone in order to have empirical verification, of a sort, in hand before approaching his colleagues. He did not want to kill his grandfather and was certain his explanation would not be believable if he got stuck 80 years in the past. So, instead, he will travel 5 years into the past and kill himself. His self from 5 years ago, that is.
Why?
If, per impossible, he got stuck there, he was pretty sure his presence would prevent any murder accusation from getting off the ground, the alleged victim being alive and well. He took his time machine, which was about the size of a shoebox, and a pistol into the hallway outside his lab. He turned the number dial on the time machine to 5, the units dial all the way up to year, the directional switch to past, and activated it. Not much changed, but he hadn't expected it to be. He had always relished continuity, which made it a little unusual that he, of all people, would invent a time machine. And so his furnishings had remained almost entirely unchanged over the 30-plus years that he'd been living in this house. He expected to find himself at work in his lab, and so walked over to it. The door was open a crack, and he was able to look in and see that, yes, he was indeed sitting at his desk looking at something. He raised the pistol, pushed the door open, and before his old self could react to the sound of the creaky hinges, he shot himself in the head, his old self. He paused for a moment to see if he noticed any differences.
Do I have a hole in my head right now?
Did he have any new memories? Did he still exist? Would one notice if one stopped existing? At this last thought, he chuckled, stepped into the room, and then pushed the return button on the time machine. Apart from the disappearance of his body, his old body, and the door closing most of the way behind him, nothing changed. After pausing again to see if he noticed any differences, he didn't. He went over to his desk to record the results of this experiment. He looked at the time machine and called up the exact coordinates it had recorded and began writing them down. But something was wrong. The coordinates were not what they should have been, not even close. As he finished writing them down, he looked back at the time machine to see what the problem was. The first thing he noticed was that although he had pushed the directional switch down to past, the switch was sticky and it hadn't clicked over. The second thing he noticed was that while he had turned the category dial all the way up to year, he accidentally pushed it too far, and since the dial had no stopper, it reset to the smallest unit. He hadn't traveled 5 years into the past, he had traveled 5 minutes into the future.
Start yelling immediately.
And behind him, the door hinges creaked.
That's a really good story.
It's a really good story.
It's written in a way that makes it like hard to palate at first, where it's like, yeah, we get it. You like science. You like to write things that are pretty, but still, like, let's get to the meat of the story. But that is a wonderful way to end that story.
Yeah.
Like, that's really fucking good. I really like that one.
So shout out to Jim S. for writing that story. I thought it was a very good story.
Shout out to you, Jim S. Unless it's supposed to be combined, your name is Jims.
When I read that, when I was searching for a story, I was like, yeah,
solid.
Good.
That is good shit. Great one to end on, too.
Yeah.
So, good stuff, Robin. I want to high-five you on that one. I think that might be one of my favorite story times.
I high-fived Spooky Mom the other day.
And she did it her normal asshole way of high-fiving.
And she's just like, I'm never high-fiving you ever again.
Because it hurts. She hits way, way too hard. She's the kid who plays too rough. So, all right.
Damn it.
Good stuff. So thank you to everyone who listened for this episode of Pastatime number 19. Shout out to everyone who wrote these wonderful, short, horror fictional stories. Shout out to Amber, who sent in their own story from the Spooky Friends community. We highly encourage anyone who's out there who has one or would like to write one to send it in. You can email pastatime@scarish.com or go to our website, scarish.com, and click on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us. Or hit us up on any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod. And Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast, and those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free. You can't go wrong with ad-free.
Ad-free is the way to be.
That's old chestnut. If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations really help us keep us going.
So yeah, that's everything we have for this episode of Pastatime. Thank you so much for everyone who listened and watched live. We appreciate all of you. And yeah, Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.